Okay, welcome everybody to tasting number 165 of the Saratoga Whiskey Club. We've been doing a lot of tastings here to start off September. Some pretty special ones as well. So we're all getting spoiled and everybody's having to pick and choose now what they want to do. So it's a little hard. I know people can't do everything, and that's okay. I can, and I am gonna keep going here. There's not that many months left in the year, so we're gonna have some special tastings still to go to wrap up the year. But just a quick announcement: we have Murray McDavid in 2 weeks. It'll be a virtual tasting. Really great lineup, 4 single casks and 2 of their cask craft kind of entry level expressions, but all new ones to the US. So most people have not probably had any of these unless they were overseas. So that's in 2 weeks. That'll be virtual. We just announced that today to first fill audience, and then we announced that yesterday to the Saratoga Whiskey Club. So we have that coming up. And then next week as well is our anniversary party here at the shop. So if you are in our area and can make it, you don't want to miss it. It's going to be really great. We're going to have some food, some pretty cool open bottles for sampling, and then a ton of opportunity to win a raffle bottle to be able to purchase at the regular price. Lots of really great bottles. So every year we're going to keep improving on that.
Say some of the bottles.
Say some of the bottles. Oh, I don't want to say all the bottles. I mean, we're gonna have, yeah, I mean, your typical Buffalo Trace expressions. So, you know, the Pappies, we're gonna have the 10, 12, 15. We'll have a bunch of Wellers, quite a bit of Colonel Taylor. We're gonna have some pretty cool Willets that we've never had before. We're gonna have some great Scotch from Springbank, Hazelburn, some Japanese from Chichibu. So yeah, lots of great things. So you definitely want to come. But yeah, let's get back to the US here. We have a really special tasting tonight. So speaking of allocated bottles, Holly and I, over the past 3 years, we've, had different types of allocated bottles come through the shop. Some of them we do put out for everybody to just purchase if they see it on the shelf and they want to spend the money. They can get it. We're not charging an arm and a leg for our allocated stuff. We're very, very fair when we put it on the shelf. No real big markups. However, we developed a really good relationship with Skurnik, who's our distributor for some of our special bottles that we get, and we were able to collect quite a bit of Old Carter over the past 2-3 years. Some of it we put out as a kind of random name generator and given people the opportunity to buy if they gave us their email. Sometimes we put them in our raffle, and then sometimes we put them on our shelf, and then sometimes we just put them in the back, and not knowing what we want to do with them. So it came to a time where we had a lot. And I said, just like some of the Bruichladdich bottles that we had last week that are pretty special, so why not taste these? I mean, what better way to do it? Again, whiskey is to be shared. That's what the club is all about. We're not about just hiding bottles on a shelf and never opening them. So we have a really incredible lineup tonight. These bottles, the general retail, if you can find it, we were charging, I think, around $250 a bottle when we were putting it on the shelf. So 6 of those would be $1,500, but most places are charging $400 or $500 for these bottles. So, if you add that all up, that's a lot of whiskey sitting on the table right here that we're going to get to try tonight. So, and we're doing 3 different types of whiskey in this tasting. So let me read a little bit about Old Carter before we jump into the first one. We have Old Carter Whiskey Company is the passion project by husband and wife team Mark and Sherry Carter. They began their beverage endeavors in the wine business. They produced fine wines in the Napa Valley with the Carter Cellars Cabernet garnering 9 perfect 100 scores by critics. The whiskey business found them several years ago, and they partnered with a Kentucky person that resurrected a long dormant brand. So this brand was a brand that was around a long time ago. So the brand sold in 2017, but then the Carters were hooked on the process of making and blending whiskeys, as well as the state of Kentucky. And so they started the Old Carter Whiskey Company to carry on their love affair with the whiskey making. So they now produce straight rye, bourbons, and American whiskey in various locations throughout Kentucky. They handle all aspects of the business themselves, from creating new blends and selecting single barrels to designing and handwriting every individual label per bottling. So very hands-on approach. So my first kind of run-in with Old Carter was back in, I think it was 2017 in Kentucky. So they were fairly new to the brand again. Actually, maybe it was 2018. Actually, I think it was 2018. I went to a whiskey bar, well, actually a wine store that had a counter there where they were selling wine samples, but then you could also buy whiskey samples too. And there were some Old Carter up on the back wall, and it was really expensive. It was, I think, $30 a pour, something like that. And for at the time, that was really expensive. It's even more now if you try and get a pour of Old Carter. But I said, all right, what the heck? I'm going to do it. I'm in Kentucky. Why not? And I remember tasting that first one and going, what? Why is this so expensive? And what is this? I was not impressed. I hope they're not listening to the recording of this. But that early release, whatever it was that I tasted, I was like, I don't know, this is overhyped, overpraised stuff. So I kind of wrote them off for the next couple of years. And it wasn't until we opened the shop and they started having these bottles come our way that I was like, okay, what is this again? Let's take a look at it. Fortunately, been able to try some since then, and it is pretty fantastic. So we're pretty lucky to get to try these. All of this is sourced from different places. So a lot of it is MGP. They do get a lot of their juice from MGP. They must have a really good connection there because a lot of this is older whiskeys. They don't actually have age statements on most of these, but from what I've read, a lot of it is older. But we're going to start tonight with what some people say is the best of the Old Carter lines, which is their American whiskey. So we're going to kind of hopefully not ruin this tasting with starting with the best, but who knows, it's possible. You know, you never know when you go into these things what's going to stand out as the best or not. But we're going to start off with American Whiskey Batch 9. And then we have Batch 11. And, you know, when I do these kinds of tastings where it's a vertical, basically this is a vertical kind of tasting, one brand. We're trying various different expressions from one brand. It's always great to do a side-by-side, especially if it's the same type of whiskey. So my recommendation with these first two is to try them side by side, see what differences we find. And then when we're ready to move on to the bourbon, we do the same with the bourbon and then finish off with the rye. So all of them side by side, which would be the best way to do it. Okay, so we're talking American whiskey. So this is not bourbon. This is American whiskey. So that means that something is different with this whiskey that makes it not bourbon or rye. And typically when you find an American whiskey, it's going to be a mash bill comprised of various grains, and none of them are over 50%. You know, you'll typically will have 3 grains, all, you know, in 30-40% range, and nothing is dominant. Or you can have, and Holly mentioned this earlier, you can have whiskeys or bourbons that are matured in a refill bourbon barrel. It's not a new charred barrel. That could be an American whiskey because bourbon has to be in a new charred barrel. So there's lots of different ways to kind of think about these. Now I think, finally figure out what makes their American whiskey. It's very hard to find information on these bottles, for one. There's not a lot of these bottles out in the wild, and not too many people are talking about them or giving reviews or know even what the mash bills are on some of the recipes. But from what I found, and we'll see if this comes true with any of our flavors that we get, it's a combination of light whiskey and bourbon. So they can't call it bourbon. However, from what I'm told or what I've read, it is a very, very high corn percentage. And as we know, with light whiskey, especially the light whiskey that we've had here in the shop, most of that's 99% corn. And I believe this is that as well. So we have this very, very high corn light whiskey with also a very high corn bourbon. It is an American whiskey. It isn't a new charred barrel. It's just a combination of two whiskeys, so you can't call it bourbon. So batch 9 is, there are 2,892 bottles, 66.4%, which happens to be the same percent as our new Kings County barrel strength bourbon that we just got in the shop today. 66.4%. This is batch number 9. And then batch number 11 is 2,786 bottles, so just a little bit less. That one is 67.3%. So both of these extremely high. And again, with light whiskey, you typically have that super high proof, mostly because it's coming off of the still at a higher proof than bourbon allows. And it retains a lot of that proof in the new in a refilled barrel. So,
Charles,
yeah.
Charles, do you have to call a light whiskey a light whiskey? Can it be bottled as an American whiskey or proof down, or what would they have to do?
Well, I mean, you can call pretty much anything an American whiskey if you want. So, you know, I guess you could. However, if you are making and aging a true light whiskey, especially the older ones, the 14, 15 year, you're going to want to tell people what it is, because that's what the allure is. People want that higher proof off the still, higher corn, you know. But yes, I think pretty much anything can be designated an American whiskey. You know, there are some bourbons that are designated American whiskeys too, just because they want that association. So, you know, these are the combination of bourbon and light whiskey. So you can't really call this either one of them. It has to be an American whiskey.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. What were you going to ask, Holly?
Just to make it more confusing.
Yeah.
And more gray.
Yeah.
I think it might, because Charles and I were trying to figure out this situation earlier. I think it might be a choice, because King's family does the same thing. That Tennessee whiskey has light whiskey in it.
Oh, okay.
And they're calling it blended bourbon.
Okay. So Holly
might have a choice.
So Holly was saying, I don't know if you guys could hear that, but we have King's family, you know, they're out of East Tennessee, and they have a Tennessee, you know, that we carry, Tennessee whiskey. This one here, and actually with this one, which again, this is a little gray area. I mean, I don't know how they're getting away with this, to tell you the truth. They have told us that they're putting in some light whiskey into this, which gives it that extra sweet kind of berry, you know, fruity note. However, it does say blended bourbon. So yeah, there's a lot of questions going on there. They don't disclose that though. you know, like, so that's not something that if you were gonna go online and look it up, they're not really showing that anywhere. So, you know, maybe that's why they're able to do it. But there's definitely a little bit of a gray area with some things. But with this, we do know, at least according to what I found, you know, that it is a combination of light whiskey and bourbon. There are some people who say that this is, of all of the three things that they produce, that the American whiskeys can be the most special, but I don't know. We'll find out. I've been hearing some really great things about these bourbons too, the later batches. So it'll be interesting to see. Anybody have any comments on the two of them and how they're different, or
I found the first one kind of classic fruitier. It had a
okay,
lot of that
first one classic fruitier.
vanilla nougat fruit.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, the second one I'm working on has like a grassy, chalky, still working on too. What's the ABV of the second one?
Oh yeah, so the second one definitely has like this almost a tart, a kind of a tartness to it in a way, at least for me. The second one is 67.3% batch 11. Yeah, I agree with you, Holly. The first one's more that kind of that classic fruity light whiskey note. Yeah, hey Kim, we're still just starting on the American whiskeys right now. You know, might as well start with a 67% belter to get our palates, you know, ready for the rest.
Charles, the batch 11 seems much higher than the 9, not, you know, 0.9% difference only.
Okay.
And if we're voting, I like number 9.
11's really interesting though. 9's
I'm
classic,
curious
but
what
11's
these would be like with a drop of water as well. You know, again, such high proof. I wouldn't put it in until you have a little bit left and maybe just do a drop, because you don't want to, if it doesn't make it better, then you've wasted a pretty great dram. So
Just tasting them with a little bit of water in my mouth. The 11 sort of disappeared, or just didn't take to that. The 9 was okay, but I still think the flavors were better without the water.
okay.
I got like really big fruit and like juicy fruit.
Yeah.
Juicy fruit, like candy. It's I think they're both delicious.
Yeah, I actually really am enjoying both of them as well. They are different. There's no question about it. And, you know, when I did a little bit of research, there's not a ton, but typically we're talking about, in this, like batch 9 was 15 barrels, you know, so they're typically in that range of 13 to 15 barrels with these batches. That's what they call a small batch. So obviously we're not having the differences in a single barrel, but even with a small batch, that number of barrels, we can really tell the difference, you know, from batch to batch. So it's pretty cool to notice that as well.
Charles, do you know if they process it, did anything different with like the ratios or the ingredients, or is it something different in the aging process, or is it just like the same exact process yields different results sometimes?
It's gonna, I mean, I don't know if the blends are the same in terms of percentages, so that would be probably where the biggest difference could be. But then also, you know, barrels mature and age differently and taste different after a certain amount of time. So you're not going to get a ton of consistency with 13 to 15 barrels. You know, they're not going to, we're not talking a big brand, you know, where they're taking 5,000 barrels and blending those together. So we are definitely going to notice that difference with an old Carter small batch. Let's put it that way. But they don't tell you. There's so little information. I really tried to get them to come online with us just to introduce themselves. I'm not Charlie Prince, so I guess I don't have enough pull. I don't know if Charlie will ever listen to that, but he's from the Drammers in New York, but it's almost impossible to get much information on these bottles. So they're unicorns for a reason. They're really good typically, but they don't need to tell you why all the time. So you said the ethanol on the batch 9 comes right at you on the nose. Was that on your first nose sip, or was that okay? Was that the first thing you had today?
Yeah, but that's what I find so interesting is that it was just as soon as I smelled it, it came the ethanol came right. I mean, even as I was taking a sip, it was in the air. But once it was on the palate, once I got it on my tongue,
yeah,
I actually felt like this was such a nice pour and not super, it didn't feel super high, not what I would have expected from the experience of bringing it up to my face.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the palate's phenomenal. I did get that as well when I first noticed this. Now I did have a little bit of whiskey before, so it wasn't as prominent, but I could still tell that there was some alcohol behind this. There's no question. That ethanol. It's dissipated though a lot. So let me just ask people what their favorite of the two batches. Just curious.
11. Yeah.
11.
11 slightly higher.
Oh wow. Okay. What about online? We have mostly 11 in house here.
11 for both of us.
Okay.
I like 9.
I like 9 too.
Okay.
I like 9.
I'm split. I can't decide.
They're both very good. Pretty hard to make a choice, to tell you the truth. I'm leaning a little bit towards 9, but I love 11 as well. So I mean, I really like them both a lot.
I apologize if people said this already because I was late, but did we talk about the fact what you would call this if you were blinded, as far as what you would say this was? Because I feel like I would not say this was some sort of American whiskey.
I always go with tasty.
No, I meant bourbon, rye, Scotch.
I think if you've had a certain number of light whiskeys, you might think it's a light whiskey. I think that would be, if I was blind. I mean, again, I didn't do this blind, but just based on the flavor profile and that kind of berry note that I get, and very high corn kind of note, I would probably lean that way. And with the heat, the alcohol, but it's a tough one. I mean, everybody would be wrong on this anyhow, because it's an American. It's not a light whiskey.
No age statement.
We don't know what the percentage of bourbon is in this mash bill. So it is very high corn though. We know that, extremely high corn, and probably a significant portion of light whiskey in this. So
now, before you said that most people would call a light whiskey because you said especially the older ones.
yeah.
Is anyone making a new one?
Yeah.
Are they making new ones for blending?
Yeah. There are some people making new ones. High West has been making light whiskey now in Park City, Utah for a while.
Stout Ridge in New York.
Oh, Stout Ridge in New York. Yep. So there are some, it's not a super popular thing to make, because typically the younger it is, the tougher it is to kind of drink. It really is something that, originally when light whiskey was being made in the late 60s and early 70s, it was being used for blends to add some, you know, sweetness to these bourbons, and again, try to get people into this category of something clearer than, you know, to compete with gin and vodka and all these martinis that were being served at the time. So, you know, it wasn't until longer that they realized that the longer it aged, you know, the more special it became. And unfortunately, the name doesn't give it justice. You know, people, when they see light whiskey, we have one on our shelf right now, a 15-year, you know, it's kind of the last thing you would think of in buying. Why would I want a light whiskey? I want a heavy whiskey. I want, you know, a bold whiskey, not a light whiskey, when it happens to be one of the boldest things on the shelf. So it's a confusing name for sure, and it takes a lot of explanation, but it is a category that if you know it, you're looking for it if you like it. And we really like it. We've had, you know, 2 barrels of it for the store so far, and both of them were phenomenal. So, and we'll hopefully do more. There's not that many older barrels out there, so it's kind of becoming more scarce as the popularity jumped. So, all right, I'm rambling. Let me finish my batch 9.
Obtainium is so good for a light whiskey. Well, not because it's a light whiskey, but just as like I didn't even know what a light whiskey is, and I wouldn't have like gone for it normally. But when you had a bottle open, it was just blown.
Now, we had a light whiskey from Obtainium, but they do other things too. So one of our local shops at Exit 9, they did an Obtainium 27-year Canadian whiskey, which is pretty special. So, and I tasted that; it was phenomenal. So they really got a great barrel there. It was not cheap, but it was really good. But yeah, Obtainium does a lot of different things. And then we had a Penelope light whiskey as well in the shop, which was really great. We were lucky to get that. All right, so we're gonna move on. Let me rinse my palate here. We put this other light whiskey back up on the shelf. Okay, bourbon time. And there was no rhyme or reason for me to pick the order I did. I don't know. Sometimes I just wing it. And I know the proofs are a little different, but I don't think that American whiskey was going to ruin our palate for bourbon. You know, I felt like it might be nice to kind of go into more classic as we kind of went through, and end with some spice with the rye. So we'll sweeten up a little bit with some corn right now and a little lower proof. So we have batch 14 and batch 15 of the old Carter bourbon, and these are more recent. These are not as old as the 9 and 11 American. I can't remember when the 11 American came out, but those I think were before the bourbon, at least the batch 15 of the bourbon. What was kind of cool is that old Carter did some releases here in New York and New Jersey that were kind of a co-state release. So they had on the label, it would say New York / or NY/NJ. And those were pretty great. So they were thinking about focusing on states as well. I'm not sure, Marshall, if they did that in California or not. I don't know if they had some California releases, but
Yeah, they did.
oh, cool. Yeah, doesn't surprise me. It makes sense, especially California. Okay, so I really struggled to find a mash bill on the bourbon. All I know, for the most part, is that it is a rye-based bourbon, but I really don't know the percentage of rye that's in it. It's MGP, most likely. Yeah, it is distilled in Indiana. Yeah, both of them. So there's a couple of different ways we can go with this. I mean, we've had there's the classic MGP bourbon recipe that, what was our tumble and dice mash bill? Do you remember? 74? Was it like our blue note? I think it was like our blue note.
36%.
It says closed outside.
Yeah.
Are you closed?
Yeah, we're having a tasting right now.
Have a good night.
All right, you too.
Enjoy.
Yep. I believe it was 74% 18 rye and 8% malted barley, or it was close to that. So in the low 70s, maybe it was 72. I can't remember, but there are a couple of traditional MGP bourbon kind of mash bills. So we can kind of just taste these and see what we think. So this first one, batch 14, was 3,046 bottles. So a little larger release than the American whiskey. This one's 58.5% ABV. And batch 15 was 3,146 bottles. Also 58.5%. So exactly same ABV on both of these.
Charles, do we know if these are barrel strength or if they've been proofed down at all?
No, these are going to be small batch barrel strength. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, no filtering, no, never cut. That's their logo on their the top of their label here. Just underneath small batch, it says never filtered, never cut. So, well, I'm getting a lot of like almost bubblegum notes on that first one on the nose. No comment. What's that? Did I say something wrong?
No, I ruined everybody else's nose when I said what I smelled.
What
Actually,
flavor bubblegum?
it's not as pronounced on the second one.
They both have that.
Hubba Bubba.
Section.
This has got the baseball card bubblegum. No, the little stick behind the cards.
Oh, that's Richard Joe.
Okay. So on that first one, I haven't tasted the second one yet. I'm definitely tasting a minty dill note coming through from the rye. Not a high like amount, but there's definitely like a mint kind of a, I don't know, a dilly note coming through.
Yeah, it's changing.
Yeah, it's changed now.
It's really kind of, in a good way, goofy whiskey.
But it's pretty well balanced. I have to say, it's definitely different. It's not as sweet as a typical bourbon I would think would be. It definitely makes me think more rye than I think bourbon in a lot of ways. The first one, I haven't tasted the second one yet, but it's in a good way though, not like in a overly spice or bad rye way. All right, try the second one. Oh, that 15 is richer to me. It's got more depth to it. It's actually got, to me, a little bit of kind of a cocoa note in the back as well, kind of rounds it out a tiny bit. Well, maybe coffee even. Oh, that 15 is really good. Oh, geez. All right. See my palate. I'm gonna try it again. They're both really good. They're just very different. It's fun to see how a batch can be the same proof and taste so very different. You know, it's probably maybe another barrel, so it could be 16 barrels versus, well, it could be older though too. I did read that with some of these, again, they don't have age statements on them. That's kind of the challenge with these batches. They don't really give you age statements, but I did read in a couple of places where there are whiskeys up to 17 years old in these releases. So not sure again what the age statement is on this. It's really hard to say, but it definitely feels like with the 15 that there's some older, kind of maybe richer bourbon in there, that the 14 is maybe lacking a little bit. I love the softness though of the 14 as well though. I love rye, so you kind of have to love rye to love these. And we know from rye that rye can have the biggest variation in profile from a flavor standpoint. So, you know, when you can play around with that variation and add that to a bourbon, it can be really fun. And that's kind of what you're getting out of this one. It's not the traditional rye spice. It's more of a, like a forest minty dill, like, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely not the baking, like pepper, you know, everybody always says pepper with rye. I'm not getting a lot of pepper on this one. It's more of a herbal kind of note than a pepper note. Grassy, yeah, fresh grass.
But Charles, we're still talking about bourbons with rye as a small grain.
Yes.
Not the straight rye where you get more of that.
No, but I mean, in this first one, the rye comes through big time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's not a ton of sweetness on this. I mean, if we're getting sweetness, it might be coming from the barrel versus the corn. You know, we might be getting those vanilla notes, caramel coming from the barrel versus the corn. It almost tastes like this corn is almost a neutral palate corn. You know, typically you're getting a sweeter taste from it, but I don't know.
Your tastes were exactly what my tastes were. When I first tasted 14, I said there's rye in there, and it just predominant rye, but not that spicy rye. It's a different type of rye. I agree. And the 15 was more it was mellower. It just seemed bigger and fuller.
Now that we're talking about it more, I remember the Tumble and Dice. Tumble and Dice was 60% corn and 36% rye and 4% malted barley. That could be what we're tasting. I mean, in a big, high rye mash bill.
Was that an MGP also?
Yeah. All of these bourbons are MGP. So
I mean, the tumbling dice.
Tumbling Dice was MGP. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Was there any chance that MGP used a different strain of corn or any heritage or any?
I don't think so. I think it's just that very low percentage where you have, you know, if I don't know, again, I could be wrong on this, but if it is that mash bill of 36% rye and that rye has a lot of flavor to it, it's going to overpower the corn. And it kind of did in this expression. It seems like it's still very good. I love the balance of it. I think it's a really nice sipper. It's very different. I don't know if I would think that do you guys think the second one is the same mash bill?
I find the second one sweeter.
Sweeter? Yeah.
Like all throughout the palate.
So it probably is a different mash bill on the second one.
Mhm. Mhm. Much more corn.
Now, I did some, when I was going through the batches of bourbon, there were some people that said that 15 was the best release of bourbon from Old Carter to date. Take that for a grain of salt. I don't know who these people are, you know, but that was just being mentioned. And I do know for a fact that most people, fewer people like higher rye bourbon than others. So take that into account too. You know, I know our Tumbling Dice, I thought had a ton of sweetness because I think the barrel added a really, really beautiful amount of sweetness. But for most people, 36% rye in a bourbon is too much. Because they're not either big rye fans or they want more sweetness or whatever, you know, or they're used to a wheated bourbon. You know, there's lots of reasons for that, but I really like what Kings County is doing though, with eliminating that from the conversation. It's just 80% corn and 20% malted barley. And you're like, take it or leave it. And it's pretty bold and in your face, but it's pretty rich and pretty great. So you don't have to think about some of that spice or wheat sweetness or any of that. What do you guys think? So what is the consensus on 14 and 15? What do you guys think? 15, 14, 14. So like split.
And we're each finding, some people find one's much sweeter than the other. which is
Okay.
interesting too.
Is it tending to be 15 being sweeter or?
I
no?
find 15 sweeter, but half the table finds 14 sweeter.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. So really mix on the answers here in the shop. Pretty much split over which one people like. Now, some people thought 14 was sweeter. So that's great. I mean, everybody again has their own palate. Nobody's you know, right or wrong. That's the beauty of whiskey. But I will say they're all wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Someday they'll learn. No, I'm just kidding. No, I love it. I love it. We have people like Ann and Peter who come into the shop. And everybody will love something and then they'll taste it and they'll be like, oh, that's nasty. So it's good though.
Okay, 15 was my favorite.
All right.
15, yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, whichever one I was tasting was my favorite at the moment I was tasting it. I loved both of them.
They are pretty great, I have to say. Actually, the American whiskeys too. I would drink all of these without a doubt at this point. There's nothing here that I would be like, that's not worth drinking.
Yeah, I found the 14 took water pretty well, but I like 15 better.
Okay. So Marshall played around with water. Did anybody play around with water on that one?
No.
Everybody's just sucking them back.
There was about that much left when I put the water in.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
What were the ABVs?
58.5 for both. 66.7.
Whiskey.
I mean, 15 is more kind of, I guess you would call the classic,
Mhm.
you know, It's got that, to me, it's got a lot of those classic notes. The 14 to me it's classic if it's a high rye, but it's not your typical, again, not going to be for everyone probably, but it's kind of hard to go wrong with these. I love the proof on them too. It's not overly hot by any means. These are like really sippable. There's no burn at all. Even with the American whiskeys, I don't think there was really any burn. They were very, very, I hate the word smooth, but they were very smooth, which is very unusual for whiskeys that are over 55% or 65%. It's the case with the American whiskeys. Anybody else have any comments you want to make on bourbons? Am I going too fast? I know these are really special whiskeys.
I'm
So.
surprised by their bourbon blends. Everyone just goes sweet with sourcing.
Yeah.
They did not.
Yeah, Holly said she was surprised that they didn't go just the full-on sweet with their sourcing. You know, I mean, they're kind of playing around a little bit, which is it. You know, when you think about it, 15 batches, you don't want them all to taste the same. I mean, great if they do and they're really wonderful, but then you're going to have one type of person that's just going to be enjoying it all throughout. So if you're playing around a little bit and throwing out different expressions, you know, you're making it interesting, right? It's not, you don't know what to expect, and that could be a good thing. I know everybody talks consistency, but I don't know. They're kind of like they're almost like a bottler, right? You know, they're like a lot of these blenders that are out there now. They're not making this whiskey; they're just playing around with it and putting it out there. Now, you have to kind of think about their background with the wine industry and maybe how that's playing into what they're doing. I don't know. You know, I mean, something to think about. They did really, really well in that wine industry. So I'm sure there's a lot of that coming through with this. They definitely following.
Have they played with different wine finishes?
I
Or
have
do
not
they
seen
just do
anything with.
straight?
Now that doesn't mean that they haven't. I don't know. I have not seen any though. The only people that I've really seen that play around with wine more than anybody is Bardstown Bourbon Company. I mean, they really kind of go full on with that, but it's not an easy thing. I'll tell you that. Wine typically is not a great partner or finisher with bourbon. Corn typically doesn't work too well with wine or even with sherry sometimes. I mean, that's tough. That's a tough marriage. But Bardstown seems to have done pretty well with that so far.
When the Carters decide that they're going to do something with these MGP product, do they have a blender? Do they have somebody? Are they doing it themselves, or do they have a whole series of people who get together to make these blends, to decide on what's happening? Because
sure, it's just them.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, they might have one or two people that are working with them, but they are in control of this. They're really overseeing everything. It's a very small, you know, I heard that there was talk of them opening up their own distillery like everybody talks about, but from what I know that's not happening at this point. But they're just focusing on putting out these great, you know, batches or they do single cast stuff too from time to time. So, but from what I've heard and read, it's just them. It's really the couple.
So are they similar to what Barrel is doing?
Well, so Barrel is much bigger kind of vision. You know, they're doing lots of finishings. you know, that's their big thing, is finishing in Mizunara and all these other kinds of oak. They're even playing around with a lot of Canadian whiskey, rum. You know, Barrel does a lot of different things, and Barrel is huge.
Oh, okay.
Barrel owns like 20,000 barrels that they play with. So I think their vision is completely different.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think Barrel also got too big too quickly. We won't talk much about them, but there's been a lot of talk about Barrel recently and kind of how they blew up too fast and spent too much, and we'll see what happens with Barrel and some of the things that they're doing. But there's been a lot of stuff going on with Barrel, but they still have great whiskey. I mean, we've loved most of the Barrel products. Okay, you guys ready for rye? All right. All right, so we're doing batch 10 and batch 14 of the rye.
Okay.
Read the info here in a second. So batch 10 is 2,532 bottles. So a little lower than what we've done before. This one is 58.3%, 58.3% batch 10. And batch 14 is only 1,620 bottles. So almost half, a little over half of what we've seen before with the other releases. Batch 14 is 61.5. So we're jumping back up into the 60s with batch 14 of the rye. Now, when I was doing my research on the rye, it's going to be different. So the batch 10 is distilled in Indiana, and it is most likely 95.5, which is what we know that most MGP comes at. And that's what I read about. However, batch 14 is distilled in Tennessee. So we should have quite different whiskey here between the two. I don't know. I mean, if we were to guess, again, Tennessee, most likely Dickel, I'm guessing. I mean, that's who usually you get older whiskey from in Tennessee. But I'm not going to.
Dickel now is having MGP do their rye, I thought.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure. But this was distilled in Tennessee, so this would not be MGP.
Right, but it might not be Dickel then either.
Well, I think the older Dickel though was
Older, okay.
Yeah. Maybe the newer Dickel is using MGP, but not the older stuff.
I could be wrong too. It's one of them other distilleries.
I had never heard that, but I don't know.
Okay.
So are you guys getting a different nose on these?
Yes.
Yes. Quite a bit, right? I mean, you're getting the classic MGP nose on the first one, on the batch 10. I'm getting more. Oh, that'll be interesting. I can't wait to try these. Ooh. Oh my goodness. Oh wow. Batch 10 has got a lot going on. Good stuff. It's like I'm getting that traditional MGP, but I'm getting a ton of like this honeycomb, like this honey is coming through in an interesting way. I don't usually get that on a rye, but
It's like wintergreen gum.
yeah,
I feel
wintergreen.
I'm chewing gum.
Yeah, like a minty wintergreen, but like with this sweetness though. There's this really interesting sweetness.
There's so much rye. I love it. It's just, and then you get the sweet. It just that rye. It tastes like a corned beef sandwich here with, rye bread. It's just, it's delicious.
Yes.
Luke, we just started on the rye.
Oh, great. Great. I'll get to that. Which one is first?
We're doing them side by side, all of them,
Okay.
each category. Oh wow, I love that. Like ridiculous. I'm kind of afraid to taste 14 then.
What's perfume?
Perfume is delicious. It is. You need a good pickle. You need a good sandwich.
Definitely getting more kind of sharp kind of mint slash pepper notes
Second one.
on the nose on 14.
True.
Huh. Much more earthy, 14. It's kind of old school, which I like. I mean, it's definitely not going to be everybody. It's not a sweet rye as much as 10 for me. Again, my palate could be very different from yours, but definitely getting a lot of that kind of earth note, a little bit of like a mustiness. What kind of notes?
All I can taste now are corned beef sandwiches.
What are you guys getting between these two? What are you thinking?
14's got a lot of minerality.
Minerality on 14? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of earthy funk.
Earthy funk?
Yeah, it's got Vinny written all over it.
Is that too dark?
It's got Vinny written all over it. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I don't think there's a whiskey that doesn't have Vinny written all over it.
Is that meant to be a positive or a negative?
It's always positive with Vinny.
Vinny the nose. Here we go.
It's a very different rye from the other one, that's for sure. 14.
I'm in rye heaven right now with this,
Yeah.
with the 10. It's wonderful.
The 10?
Yeah,
10.
the 10.
So the 14 reminds me of, I get a little bit, Holly, I get with the 14, I get a little bit of the Abruzzi rye kind of note from Leopold. It's that
Get that,
earthy kind of,
okay.
you know how you get that with that bottle?
Yeah.
Nutty, earthy. So we have a Leopold bourbon, which uses a Abruzzi rye as the secondary grain. And you see Abruzzi in a couple of different states. And it is this more earthy kind of note. I don't know. It's not your typical rye bread note. It's more kind of dirty, earth note.
Yeah.
Musty.
Soily.
Getting a lot of this Dickel. I guess it's a Dickel. I don't know if it's a Dickel, but we'll. So Luke, you didn't hear. So the first one, batch 10, is MGP, Indiana. And batch 15 is from Tennessee, but we don't know where. We're assuming most likely Dickel, but that could be wrong. I mean, there have been some distilleries now in Tennessee long enough that have some aged product that it could be somewhere else, to tell you the truth.
I won't say I just.
All right, preferences. 10 or 14?
10.
You don't like 14? Holly doesn't like 14. Wow.
I don't care for 14 either.
Okay. All right.
Tastes like eating a shovel of dirt.
All right.
But that,
I think 14 tastes like children's vitamins.
Children's vitamins. All right.
That's a common Dickel note, right? Isn't the
Right.
Flintstone vitamin is the Dickel?
Yeah, that's the Dickel note. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that like 10 is like the easy, like it's great. But like I want to figure 14 out. And so like I keep going back to it and I keep drinking it and I'm enjoying it. So when you ask what like a favorite is, it's hard for me to answer that because I think they serve different purposes. But I find 14 more compelling. And more interesting.
I'm kind of in the same camp, tell you the truth, Kim. I love 10 for what it is, and it is a classic. So we have a bunch of rye behind me, and at the moment, my favorite rye that we carry is the Tumble and Dice 8-year from David Schmier. And I mean, it's incredible. And it's MGP, it's older, it's beautiful, and it has won a bunch of awards, and it's you know, whenever we run out of it, I make sure we get more because I don't know how long it will be around. But that 10 reminds me of that. It's really great. But the 14 has a lot of that. I love the Leopold for what it is. And not many people like the Leopold because it's earthy and it's old school and it's not normal. It's not that traditional kind of note. So it's kind of that same world. Now, the one thing that I do know with the Leopold is you cannot taste that with other things. So if we're doing side by side, no question, the 10 is gonna outwin the 14, right? Just because of that classic versus, like you were saying, unusual or complex or whatever the term is. But so if you had the, I'd be curious to know if we ever were able to have the 14 by itself one night without all this other whiskey on our palate and what we would think of it. If that was what you were drinking, you know, I mean, that would be a good way to kind of approach that bottle, I think. How about everybody else? Anybody? So
yeah, I have to say I prefer the 10 just because I see it as this just really incredible example of a classic rye. And with the mint of the rye, like on the nose for me, I get like a mint ice cream. Wait, there's like I get this almost ice creamy note, which I never really get in a rye. And that's just with the nose. But I do really appreciate the other one. I think it's fun to taste them side by side. I like the 14 in the way you would like a cigar, like that earthiness or like something about it that just has like that earthy and then the little vegetal rye side to it. I don't know. I think they're good in combination actually because they're different.
yeah, I think it's great to be able to try them together for sure. And it's fun that they're distilled in different places too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the rest of what we tasted before, I know you just joined on, was all pretty much Indiana. So it's pretty much apples to apples, but they were very different in flavors, but it was all from one place. So, yeah. Anybody else have anything to say? Quiet group. Everybody's in the old Carter meditation right now. All right, so let's go back to the whole tasting and talk about, let's not pick out a bottle, but let's just say category wise, what order of category did you like the most? And I know it's a very hard thing to ask, but because they all were pretty good in their own ways, right? But very different as well.
For us, it wasn't that difficult because you pegged it right from the beginning. The American.
You like the American whiskey the best?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Both of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say I was torn because in each category I heavily preferred one to the other, and the rye batch has my least favorite in 14, and then my favorite in 10. So, oh,
I think I liked the bourbon the most.
Okay,
He sticks.
nice.
I'm a sucker for rye. I just think it like has the most complexity.
Yep.
So that would be my favorite.
Awesome. Okay.
I like the bourbon the best.
Okay.
Yeah, whiskey for me. I'm in the whiskey camp on that.
What about, oh, Luke, you don't count, so you join late.
By the way, just because Luke hasn't tasted them doesn't mean he can't vote.
Category. No,
Oh.
I can't. I've tried several old Carter bourbons, all of which I absolutely love, like my top tier. But I've never tried the American, so I can't. I just can't comment on it. But I do love these ryes. Both of these ryes I really love.
All right, in the group here, category wise, not bottle, but just category. What was your favorite category?
Right, for sure.
Rye,
Bourbon.
rye, bourbon,
American whiskey.
American,
Bourbon also.
bourbon,
American whiskey.
American,
Bourbon.
bourbon,
Second choice. The rye.
rye. Oh, wow, it's like split. Literally split between all the categories. So that's really a great sign for old Carter. I mean, that's what you want to hear. Now I hope they're watching at some point. Even though they owe us one for not responding to my emails, but it's all good. It's all good. Anybody else have anything to comment or say or join
Charles,
up?
did you say your preferred? Which one you preferred?
I didn't. My preferred was old Carter.
Very good, very good. Agreed.
No, I mean, if I had to choose, if I was gonna sit back and I don't know, that I did love the American whiskeys. Those were really fun. And I'm a huge light whiskey fan, so I did love the rye though too. The bourbon was a little bit of a letdown for me, but the rye was great, and the American I think would probably be the one that I would, if I were to get the opportunity to try more and I had to pick, I'd probably go with the American, just because. But,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, to pick one.
yeah. All right, guys, we're gonna sign off. I know it's a little only over an hour, but I think we did pretty well on pace and
Great.
Very good.
Wonderful.
kind of do them all side by side. And we got to taste some really special bottles. These are, I don't know if anybody, there you go. I don't know if there are many people, groups in the US that have been able to do something like this. This is truly unique, special, and we're very appreciative of being able to do this. So I'm glad.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank
It's
you.
an incredible
Thank you very
opportunity.
No problem. All right.
Thank you for saving these bottles for us. It's
We'll
great.
see you next
Yes, yeah, very generous.
time. Yeah, no problem. That's what we're here for. So
That's
We're
good to know, Charles. You're here to give us good whiskey.
we're here. You know it. All right, guys. Good night. Have a good
Thanks a
one.
lot, Charles.
Night.
Bye.